Now on Mississippi Insight. 2 hours, 13 candidates, and lots of input from Jackson's mayoral candidates on how to fix Mississippi's largest city. We'll hear from them and get analysis from Jackson State political science professor D'Andra Orey this week on Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown on broadcast and on podcast. Thank you for joining us for this March 9th edition of Insight. With its years of decades of chronic problems and frequent challenges, viewers outside the capital city may ask, who would ever want to be mayor of Jackson? But there are 19 qualified candidates for the job in the 2025 election, and we heard from most of them Tuesday night in a 2-hour forum hosted by our partners at Jackson State University and broadcast live by 12 News. You can watch the entire thing online at WJTV.com or on YouTube. But today, we wanted to offer a brief summary and bring you 13 candidates' answers to a very simple question. What would you do in your first 100 days in office if elected?
Great question. The first thing that I want to do, I think I told you earlier, 90 to 120 days, I want to build and have an interlocal agreement with the state of Mississippi on 2 bases. I told you that we need their equipment so we don't have to buy it, law enforcement equipment, so we don't have to buy it. And we're going to use our budget that we already have to hire part-time police officers, 20 to 25 hours a week, coming from other municipalities in other counties. Put them inside of communities to stabilize those communities, to get hardcore crime out of those communities. The other issue I want to deal with, put the city of Jackson under a state of emergency when it comes to homelessness, drug use, abandoned properties, loitering, people that are out on our highways and byways stopping and knocking on windows. Under this administration, it will not happen. Read my lips. I'm going to ship you out of Jackson, Mississippi.
Rodney's just a pretty simple guy. And quite honestly, kind of a boring guy. But I love to do the work. And I know that my contractor background recognizes that any effective outcome starts with a good plan. And we have plans, we have ideas of where we're going now. But we have to start day one. Peeling the layers back, understanding exactly what we expect to find there and what the reality is when we get there. But the number one thing has to be the violence in the city. The number one economic development issue is going to be violence. We have to deal with it. The number one quality of life issue is violence. If we don't take care of those things, we are not going to be successful as a city.
Well, the first thing I do is continue what I'm already doing. I would expand it throughout the entire city. The program that I have working with our youth, I would make it available to all of the kids in Jackson. The dilapidated properties that I've been cleaning up and turning into affordable housing, I would expand that with our churches that have community development corporations in them, and would expand that all over the city of Jackson. I would let our police officers know that I have their back and that we're going to get them the equipment they need. We talk about our police officers' salaries, but we have to understand that our police officers' jobs are a little tougher than the ones in Madison and in Clinton, so we have to pay them accordingly. And last, I will work with our state, local, and federal officials to get things done in Jackson.
In the first 100 days, I would staff the city properly. Staffing is critical, that we get the right people in the right place. It won't work. So I do need an engineer in charge of Public Works Department. I do need an architect in the planning department. I do need an audit of the city's financials to see exactly where we are in our budget, where our money is. I do need to conduct an inventory to see where all of our assets are and how they're being maintained. And I do have to establish discipline in the organization. You're going to give us a good day's work, because I'm going to be there first thing in the morning and I'm going to be the last one to leave. And so I'm going to put that kind of discipline in the organization. And then I'm going to resize this city based upon the population that we have and the troubles that we have now. And finally, I'm probably going to interview a couple of these guys at the podium today to see if I can't get them on my team. That's what I'm going to do.
Sir, the priority in the first 100 days are going to be to focus on, number one, the city employees. They've been asked to do a lot with little, and they need to know that their leader sees them. The next thing is, of course, making sure that the budget is where it needs to be. I've already done a public records request. I'm reviewing the budget from the last 5 years, and I have the personnel records for the city. I need to make sure that we're staffed appropriately and properly. I'm also going to be making a request to the Department of Public Safety, Tyndall, asking for support for a metro area violent crime task force. I'm a law and order guy, but that's not all that it is. We're also going to be standing up the nonprofit cooperative to work with nonprofits across the city that are already meeting with young people and doing that work. And so in the first 100 days, we're going to focus on violent crime, and we're going to focus on our young people, but I'm also going to meet with Jackson Water as well as the 1% Commission to talk about infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, on day one, the very first thing I plan on doing is getting all of the city heads to update their employment applications. And it's not to get rid of anybody, but to let them understand that we're not going to be doing business as usual. If you have a job to take care of this city under my administration, I expect you to do it. If you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. Secondly, I'm going to make sure that we open every single community center in this city. We have community centers that have closed, whatever the reason may be. If the city can't keep them up, then we're going to give them to organizations that will, because we need those inner city community centers in order to give our young people something to do. We're going to also continue to build on the work that Chief Wade is doing and making the police department more community oriented. And then another thing we're going to do, we're going to go every ward, we're going to go to every ward to get an update on what they feel we're doing and what they feel we need to do within that first 100 days.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
The very first thing we're going to do is restore trust and accountability in the city of Jackson by putting together a good team of folks who are professionals and who know how to get the job done. If we don't do that, anything else will go for nothing. The second thing that we've got to do is focus on restoring basic services. We are compared to a third world country, and that is not right for the city of Jackson to be so described. So we've got to establish those basic services, deal with the blight, deal with the crime, deal with the high unemployment, deal with the basic infrastructure needs that we have. We've got to do that. And then the third thing is establish what our priorities are. The old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. We haven't had a strategic plan in the city of Jackson in 25 years, and that's something that we've got to do.
Well, we actually issued a strategic plan, so I don't know what the prior years were, but let me say this. It's a lot we're going to do in 100 days. You know, what we're going to do is continue to advance the work that's already happening, but we are going to reassess our team. When we took the helm, we had city employees that were being furloughed, which meant we were balancing the budget on city workers' backs. We have now been able to not only provide 2 raises, as I mentioned, to our police department, we have virtually provided a raise to every single division in the city. And so we're going to assess what's working, but we're also going to do something called a participatory budgeting process that we're going to launch for the whole city. We want residents to be engaged in this process. Our central premise is to democratize power so that residents have more access to the decision-making over their quality of life. And so we want residents to inform us of what their priorities are, so we're no longer scratching where you're not itching, right? But we need your engagement in that process. We've tried to do that before, even using a monopoly game so residents would understand how the city financing, you know, what came from grants, what was restricted funds, so that we can engage in that process. And we're lastly going to do a city cleanup.
Thank you, Mayor.
First 100 days, we're catching up the 2 years behind of state audits. We're going to conduct a forensic audit of every department. We are going to conduct 90-day evaluations of every single employee in the city. We're going to hire a public works director. We're going to establish multiple residence councils, including another youth council. We're going to present the council the City Council with a plan for the remaining 25% of the city budget, focusing on JPD, the fire department, and our public works. We're going to launch a functional city app, as well as a resident dashboard where you can track the progress of our spending, city projects, and tasks around the city. And we're going to make sure that we're providing accountability. Every single department is going to be under a microscope, and if you're not doing your job properly, we'll assess, do you have the tools that you need and the resources? If yes, you're probably going to get fired. If no, then we're going to work to make sure that you get the tools that you need so you can serve residents well. We're going to have the best customer service of any administration in the city. It's going to be better than Chick-fil-A when I worked there. That's my plan.
Proverbs 29:18 says, where there's no vision, the people perish. But tonight I declare and decree that Jackson will not perish. As a business owner, I would bring, collaborate with everyone that we need at the table. We're gonna call the city council, each department head, a youth representative from each ward, a representative from each university to come to the table. We sit down and come up with strategies that will bring Jackson back to the glory days. And that means providing for all the citizens, not just North Jackson, but we want to make sure we include South Jackson as well.
Businesses in Jackson over the last 20 or 30 years, businesses and industry have left. What has come in has been the compassion industry. When I say the compassion industry, we're talking about the groups that serve the homeless. That's the reason why you see more homeless. The 501c3s and all those, they've been so successful. They set up all the food banks and the housing. It attracts it. So if we're in other cities like Madison, they have city fathers that are involved with businesses like dealerships, etc. We have businesses, the 501c3s, their clients are the vagrants out here. That's why you have more of them. You don't see the centers up there in Madison. That's why you don't see vagrants in Madison. So we have to get the 501c3s to come to the table and say, look, guys, when things were good, we gave willingly to you. Now we're hit a rough patch. We need everybody to adjust. Bring the 501c3s there and say, look, if you feed 200 people a day, we need 200 hours of community service to help Jackson out.
Thank you, Mr. Wade.
The first 100 days, I would like to meet with the governor and lieutenant governor, and then with the entire delegation to form strong, solid relationships. In the first 100 days, I would like to start restoring law and order back into the city. Also, I would like to meet with all the businesses locally, African American and Caucasians, to let them know that they have someone who is going to use Jackson first. And also, we're going to do a massive cleanup of the city to let people know that we're open for business.
After meeting with the city council, I'm going to see where we are with our resources, our staffing, meeting my department head to see who's going to come and who we going to let go. And then we'll see where we at, what resources, revenues we do have. We're going to see what we can cut and reduce waste, or create a grant writing team where we're going to be able to solicit more funds. And then we'll be able to meet with the citizens of Jackson and see what I can do and we can do to build that relationship back. Also meeting with the legislator and the governor to see what we can do to build those relationships back and win back some of the systems that we have lost to make Jackson better and greater. And without excuses, let's move us forward.
Again, watch the entire forum online at YouTube and WJTV.com. A JSU political expert joins us for analysis on Mississippi Insight after a quick break. Let's talk more about the big mayoral forum at JSU with Dr. D'Andra Orey. He is a professor of political sciences at Jackson State University. Dr. Orey, welcome to Mississippi Insight.
Hey, thank you for having me.
First, let's give us your general take. What did you think of voters? Did they get a proper look at the electoral candidates that are running for this mayor's office?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was general. When you have 1 minute to answer a question, it's a bit difficult to lay out your platform, for example. So a lot of the questions and answers, the answers rather, were general responses, but I think they, got a sense of the direction in which the candidates were going with some of those questions, at least.
We worked a lot with the questions from JSU students that we were talking about, and there were 3 categories: crime, roads, and water. Do you believe that we heard enough specifics from the candidates on these topics?
Well, I think the candidates moved away from some of the students' questions. The students' questions were specifically related to Jackson State. And I guess, rightfully so, because of the broader audience and the electorate. It was good that they did expand the discussion, but I think the students specifically were looking for more, for example, as it relates to water on campus and the lack of water in terms of the crises that have occurred. But for the most part, they were, pretty broad in their responses to cover at least, beyond Jackson State. And, for example, with the policing, they did, talk about Capitol Police around Jackson State, but then they also expanded it across the city.
We talked about the money and how the issues and how you need an economy to deal with some of these issues. How effective were they in addressing money and what it will take to bring investment into the city?
Well, there's a dearth of funds that, the city's working with. And so, like I said, with 1 minute, it's difficult to lay out a platform in terms of how you would obtain money. Some suggest that go to the federal government for grants, for example. So it's difficult when you only have 1 minute. But I think they did okay with trying to articulate within that minute. But it's just difficult to try and lay out an actual plan within that scope of time.
Democrats have traditionally held the mayor's office. Which of these 12 Democrats have the wind at their back come April 1st becomes this primary?
Well, typically it's the incumbent, but incumbency can have an advantage where you have name recognition, for example, or it can have a disadvantage. When you look at retrospective voting, when folk look back and evaluate the candidate based on their performance. So it just depends on how the electorate is perceiving the incumbent. You have someone like John Horn, who is in the state legislature. He has political experience. Now, whether or not the electorate knows him because he represented a specific district, that's a different question. So, name recognition is something that you look for. And Horn actually did sort of beef up his opportunity to get name recognition when he played the campaign advertisements throughout the debate.
The fact that there's so many candidates running for this office, does that signify that people want change, or what does that signify to you?
I think they look at it as an opportunity. I think because of some of the crises that have taken place in the city, because it seems as though the city has not, in some respects, been able to correct or had some challenges, then these candidates really think that they might have an opportunity just as much as anybody else. And so, they put their name in the hat as well.
Now, we should also know that Mayor Lumumba now faces a July 2026 trial date on federal charges linked to the bribery scandal. How big of an impact will this play in his re-election bid?
Well, that's a good question. I do not know, but I can say that it could serve as a disadvantage, but it may not serve as a disadvantage. As you recall, Bill Clinton had a scandal associated with his presidency, and his approval rating actually went up. So, it could be the case that folk look at this as a witch hunt, but, whether or not it impacts him negatively, I don't know whether or not that would be the case.
There are also 3 Republican candidates, 4 independent candidates, and who we won't see on the ballot until the June 3rd election, general election there. Do any of them have a real shot in the general election against the Democratic nominee?
No, this election will be determined in the Democratic primary. Jackson is just a Democratic city, and the opportunity for a Republican to win is really, really difficult. Now, it could be the case that Republican electorate turnout could be such that it can offset or could serve as an advantage over folk who don't come back out to vote from the Democratic Party. But typically, this is decided during the Democratic primary.
What are Jackson voters looking for from the next mayor in this election?
Well, I think, you have to look at the infrastructure. That's definitely a problem. The potholes, the crime, for example. Those are the two main ones when you look at the water crisis that has occurred here and the issues with respect to the potholes. Some folk will look at the fact that this is not an issue that has just arose. This is an issue that has been around for a while in terms of the pipes and not replacing those pipes over years. And so we're looking at years of neglect. So there are some sophisticated voters who will understand that. Now, how many of those voters there will be, that's to be decided.
Dr. Orey, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, and we'll be right back. Big thanks to JSU Professor D'Andra Orey for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.